As the world turned its gaze to the year 1945, the shadow of war loomed large across continents, yet the tides were shifting with unmistakable momentum. The chaos and destruction of World War II had raged for more than 5 years, embroiling nations, armies, and civilians in a struggle of unprecedented scale. By January 1, 1945, the outcome was not yet sealed, but the Allies were closing in on the Axis powers from both east and west. This final phase would see desperate offensives, heart-wrenching suffering, and ultimately the dawn of peace, though not without profound consequences that would shape the world for generations. On the Western Front, the new year opened in the midst of the Battle of the Bulge, Adolf Hitler's last great gamble. In December 1944, German forces had launched a surprise counteroffensive in the Ardennes forest, hoping to split the Allied armies and recapture the vital port of Antwerp. For weeks, brutal fighting raged through the bitter cold, with American forces, surrounded and outnumbered in places like Bastogne, holding out in the face of relentless attack. By mid-January, the Allies had repelled the offensive, inflicting grievous losses on the Wehrmacht, whose once mighty ranks were now battered and depleted. Simultaneously, on the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union prepared for a colossal winter offensive. On January 12th, the Red Army launched the Vistula-Oder offensive from Poland, smashing through German lines with overwhelming force. City after city fell as Soviet troops surged westward, liberating Warsaw on January 17th and reaching the Oder River, the last natural barrier before Berlin, by the end of the month. The German army, reeling from losses and with dwindling resources, could do little to stem the tide. As winter thawed into spring, the pace of Allied advances accelerated. In the west, British, American, Canadian, and French forces crossed the Rhine River in March, the symbolic gateway to Germany's heartland. The capture of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen on March 7th gave the Allies a critical foothold east of the river, hastening the collapse of German resistance. Meanwhile, in the south, American and French armies swept through the Saar and Rhineland, while British forces advanced across northern Germany. In the east, the Soviets pressed forward with relentless determination. Battles raged in Silesia, Pomerania, and East Prussia. Civilian populations suffered terribly, caught in the crossfire or fleeing westward as the Red Army advanced. The memory of atrocities committed during the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 fueled Soviet vengeance, leading to widespread violence and retribution against German civilians and soldiers alike. By April, the Allies had encircled the Ruhr, Germany's industrial heart, capturing hundreds of thousands of troops. The Nazi regime, increasingly isolated and delusional, clung to power in Berlin. Adolf Hitler, holed up in his Führerbunker beneath the ruined Reich Chancellery, issued orders for fanatical resistance, refusing to accept the inevitability of defeat. Yet the end was near. On April 16th, the Soviets launched the Battle of Berlin, the final assault on the Nazi capital. Over 2 million Soviet troops, supported by thousands of tanks and aircraft, hammered the city's defenses. Street by street, block by block, the Red Army fought its way into the heart of Berlin. The city descended into chaos, buildings shattered, civilians cowering in basements, and German soldiers, some seasoned veterans, others teenage conscripts, mounting desperate defenses. As Berlin fell, Hitler's inner circle collapsed. On April 30th, Adolf Hitler took his own life, along with his wife of one day, Eva Braun. In the days that followed, the remaining Nazi leadership either fled or surrendered. Berlin surrendered to the Soviets on May 2nd, and one by one, German forces across Europe laid down their arms. On May 7th, in Reims, France, General Alfred Jodl signed the unconditional surrender of all German forces, effective the following day. In Moscow, the news was received on May 9th, which became known as Victory Day in the Soviet Union. Across Europe, crowds flooded the streets, celebrating the end of 6 years of war. The guns finally fell silent. But while Europe rejoiced, the war raged on in the Pacific. Since the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, the United States and its allies had waged a costly campaign of island hopping, steadily pushing Japanese forces back toward their home islands. By 1945, The Japanese Empire was battered but unbroken, and the prospect of invasion loomed. In February, American forces landed on Iwo Jima, a small volcanic island strategically vital for its airfields. The battle was ferocious. Japanese defenders, entrenched in a labyrinth of tunnels and bunkers, fought to the last man. The iconic image of U.S. Marines raising the flag atop Mount Suribachi symbolized the hard-won victory, but at a terrible cost: nearly 7,000 Americans and over 20,000 Japanese killed. In April, the Battle of Okinawa began, the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. For 82 days, American and Japanese forces clashed in a battle marked by kamikaze attacks, fierce resistance, and heavy civilian casualties. By June, Okinawa was secured, but the toll was staggering. Over 12,000 American and more than 100,000 Japanese soldiers dead, along with tens of thousands of Okinawan civilians. As the Allies tightened the noose, Japan's leaders refused to surrender, even as their cities were devastated by firebombing. On March 9th and 10th, a massive air raid on Tokyo killed more than 100,000 people in a single night. The prospect of a land invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, promised even greater carnage, with estimates of millions of casualties. Meanwhile, a secret project was nearing completion. Since 1942, scientists in the United States, Britain, and Canada had worked on the Manhattan Project, racing to develop an atomic bomb. On July 16th, in the New Mexico desert, the first successful test, the Trinity explosion, unleashed a force unlike anything the world had ever seen. In late July, Allied leaders met at Potsdam, near Berlin, to discuss the post-war order and issue an ultimatum to Japan: surrender unconditionally, or face prompt and utter destruction. Japan's government, divided and desperate, did not respond. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. In an instant, the city was obliterated. Tens of thousands died in the blast, and thousands more succumbed to burns and radiation in the days and weeks that followed. 3 days later, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki, with similar devastation. The horror of atomic destruction, combined with the Soviet declaration of war against Japan and a massive invasion of Manchuria, finally broke Japanese resistance. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a radio address, the first time his people had ever heard his voice. On September 2nd, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, Japanese officials signed the formal instrument of surrender. World War II was over. The aftermath of the war brought relief and hope, but also immense challenges. Europe and Asia lay in ruins, cities reduced to rubble, economies shattered, millions displaced. The full extent of Nazi atrocities emerged as Allied troops liberated concentration camps, Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, exposing the horrors of the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews and millions of others had been systematically murdered. In the immediate post-war years, the Allies sought to rebuild and reshape the world. In Germany and Austria, occupation zones were established under American, British, French, and Soviet control. The Nuremberg trials brought Nazi leaders to justice for war crimes and crimes against humanity, setting a precedent for international law. In Japan, American occupation under General Douglas MacArthur oversaw sweeping reforms: democratization, demilitarization, and the drafting of a new constitution. War criminals were tried in Tokyo, and the emperor renounced his divine status. Across Europe, new borders were drawn, millions of people were uprooted, and old empires crumbled. The Soviet Union extended its influence over Eastern Europe, installing communist governments from Poland to Bulgaria. The world soon found itself divided into two camps: the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, led by the Soviet Union. The Cold War had begun. Yet, amid the devastation, seeds of hope were planted. The United Nations was founded in October 1945, aiming to prevent future global conflict and promote cooperation. The Marshall Plan, launched in 1948, helped rebuild Western Europe's shattered economies. Former enemies became allies, and new partnerships blossomed. The legacy of World War II would shape the rest of the 20th century. The war's end marked the beginning of decolonization, as nations in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East sought independence from European powers. The memories of war spurred efforts toward human rights, international justice, and nuclear nonproliferation. But the scars of conflict remained. In the memories of survivors, the ruins of cities, and the political tensions that lingered long after the shooting stopped. The lessons of sacrifice, resilience, and the cost of hatred would echo through the decades, from the frozen forests of the Ardennes to the burning skies over Hiroshima. The final months of World War II were a crucible of suffering and hope, destruction and deliverance. As nations rebuilt and mourned, the world resolved, never again. Yet the peace that followed was fragile, and the challenges of a new era had only just begun.